Welcome! In this game I will show you how to set up a trap in the opening and destroy your opponent right after. Here we enter in a b6 variation, the English defense. What does black want to achieve? Put the bishop over here and get a lot of pressure along this diagonal. Well, we know about it and we play e4. That's the downside of b6, is that white can grasp a very big center over here. But what if check? You might think, well, then we simply put the bishop in between, and after bishop b7, for example, knight to c3, look at this great center, the pieces will develop further and white is just very well positioned. So here black goes bishop to b7, attacking this pawn, this weak pawn, and if you go knight c3, then this bishop goes here, and it might get a bit awkward over here, something like this, and black is fine and has a lot of pressure already on white's position. But instead, I went for bishop to d3, keeping the flexibility and protecting this pawn as well. And after check here, I don't put my knight in between. No, I will go king to f1. And my king is quite safe here. After a sample line like bishop back, knight to c3, d6 and knight f3, h4 will follow and rook to h3, getting pressure on black's king side. Great position for white. Instead, my opponent plays the move f5, and here we set up the trap. Look at this bishop, it's eyeing on the g2 square, if this pawn is gone. And then, this is a simple trick to win the rook. But we've set up the trap and we simply take the pawn. Brilliant move! Why? Well, black simply takes here, and you think, well, the rook is hanging, right? That's true, but white gets an amazing attack. How? Queen to h4 check, and look at the weaknesses around the white squares in black's camp. And this bishop is out of the game for now, right? And king forward, you run into queen g5 and then the bishop hangs. So you have to go g6 here, and then you can simply take the pawn, setting up the x-ray on the king. And you cannot really take. You might think, well, then the rook is hanging. Well, that's not the best move, because this rook is also hanging, right? Remember, there is a better move in this position, and that's to simply take the pawn with the queen. There's no defender, so you have to play your king forward, and then there's this check, and you will win the queen. Even more powerful, and white is of course completely winning. And knight to f6 is also not working, because then you still give a check, and yeah, black takes your queen, but you have a good fork here, and you simply get another queen and win the rook at the same time. And after takes here, you simply go here, attacking the knight, and you know, the bishops will enter the game as well at some point. So black has to go bishop to g7, preventing the pawn push. But now you simply take another pawn. So you already have won 2 pawns, and you've already won 2 pawns, and you have a great position with a lot of attackers. The king has to move, and when you're attacking, you want to have more pieces into the attack. Bishop to g5. Attacking the queen, a very forcing move, and black needs to react immediately, and white brought another attacker into the game. Knight goes to f6, blocking the pin, and at the same time also attacking the queen. And I play back my queen. But I have a battery on the knight and the queen, and I have a very strong position. Here black takes the rook. I gave up the rook, it's a sacrifice in the end, but I have to show that this sacrifice was worth it. And how do you continue? Because my knights are passive, my rook is not doing a lot, and I need to bring more attackers into the game. And what's the best way? Knight to e2. This knight will likely go to g6. It might feel slow, but it's very much on time. Here, bishop b7 doesn't really work, because I simply keep on developing, and yeah, in this position, my rook will join the game, my knight will go join the game, this knight maybe at some point also, because of this pin, right? So I have a very strong position. That's what my opponent saw, kept the bishop on this square and goes queen to e7 instead. But now I have a very forcing move, knight to f4, threatening the fork on the queen and the rook, a family fork. Queen to f7, getting out of the fork, but still I can give the check here. And the king has to move. This is the best move, not going into the pin for the knight. And here the best move would have been knight to e5, keeping the knight into the game, attacking the queen, but after moves like this, check. This is still completely winning for me, but it's not as concrete as what I tried to do, and I took the rook. But it's not too good, as the rook wasn't doing anything basically. Still, material wise, I'm okay now. Black takes my knight, and I bring the other knight into the game, setting up another trap. F3 will follow, and then the bishop is locked in. Cannot go anywhere. Bishop b7 would have been the best move here actually, and I would simply go either d5 or long castle, get my rook into the game, and I have a great position. I'm a piece down, but I have 2 pawns up, and one of these pawns is already on h7, and black's king is very much weak. Instead, black tried to develop the knight and maybe attack the bishop and threaten this fork at some point. I ignore it and go f3. Now this bishop cannot really go anywhere, and I will likely win this bishop sooner or later. Knight to b4, and the best move here would have been to go b1, protect this square and also these squares still, and at some point still, for example after d5, go a3, kick away the knight. If it goes to c6, then I can get my bishop back into the game. But I went for the more concrete option instead, attacking the rook with a tempo, and then maybe I can castle next, but it gets a question mark. Why? Well, my opponent should have simply taken, and this would have equalized the game. After c6, I still think I'm better, but according to the computer this is equal. Instead, my opponent plays d5, and this gives me the opportunity to open up the game. After my opponent takes, if this pawn takes, then look at this open file. Maybe the rook will land here sooner or later, and black is busted. And that's why black should have taken here on the e4 square. And if I take back, well, this bishop is active now. This pawn is a bit weak. This pawn is also a bit weak. And white is still much better, but black decides to take back with the pawn. And now this file is completely open and white is completely winning. I go bishop to f5. Why? Well, I saw that black was threatening this fork, but I realized it doesn't care so much. But black tried to go after this anyway and played knight to e4, blocking the protection of the c2 square, but giving up the knight for it. And I don't really care about my rook so much because it's out of the game anyway, and these bishops are super strong. So I simply take the knight, and my opponent goes knight to c2, going for the fork. But I calculated all this, and my bishops and the queen would simply overpower my opponent, was my thinking. So I go king to d1, preventing basically any follow-up checks as soon as the knight takes, and that's what my opponent did. The knight cannot really escape, and there's not really any good checks also. Knights are really good protectors of a king when they're close to each other, both for rooks, bishops and queens. But what's the best move in this position? By far, queen to h6, threatening to go here, threatening to go here. So let me show you. So if, for example, rook to d8, then bishop g6 would already win the queen. But that's what black saw, and that's not what black did, and took the pawn. But I simply ignore this bishop. This bishop is completely useless, and I give a check on c6. Also threatening to take the rook. If, for example, the king goes here, well, that's what my opponent did, king to f8, but this would not be the best move. It's still winning, but the more forcing move is to go check on h6. And now if you put the bishop in between, well, then you simply promote, because the bishop is pinned to the king. And this is winning, checkmate and 2 on the board. Instead, the king goes to e7 and I take the pawn with a check. Best move would have been king to e8, and this is a checkmate in 12 for white, but my opponent went to f6 and this is a checkmate in 1. Do you see it? It's a bit in the middle of the board, the king cannot go anywhere. And this bishop is undefended. Can you defend the bishop and attack the king at the same time? Yes, queen e5 check. So this is how you set up a trap and completely destroy your opponent. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you. Bye bye.